Similarly, we have a distinguished speaker from uh, New Delhi, India. Dr. Jagannath P. Panda. Welcome, Dr. Panda. Dr. Jagannath P. Panda is a research fellow and center coordinator for East Asia at the Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, MPIDSA, New Delhi, India. He is the series editor of Routledge Studies on Think Asia. Dr. Panda is an expert on China and Indo-Pacific security with a prime focus on East Asia, China, Japan, and Korean Peninsula. He is the author of the book India-China Relations, Politics of Resources, Identity and Authority in a Multipolar World Order, 2017. He is also the author of the book China's Path to Power, Party, Military, and the Politics of State Transition. Mr. Chair, distinguished speakers, dear participants. Firstly, let me welcome you all here in this sunny afternoon from Kathmandu, Nepal. Although there is corona threat in the world, particularly in India and Nepal, with some extent in China as well, we are having this very important exchange of views and ideas through this webinar on the fluctuation in the relationship between two Asian great powers, China and India. Please accept our warm welcome and gratitude to you all for being here with us to make this webinar successful. As I just mentioned, we really think that this is a very important webinar because as a Nepal-based institution working on the field of international politics, foreign policy and diplomacy, we believe that not only the bilateral relations of Nepal between these two neighbors, but the relations of those two with each other also matters a lot for Nepal. As an ultimate neighbor, Nepal has no options than to deal with the relations separately or collectively with China and India. China and India hold great civilization of the humankind from a very old sociological and anthropological history, having great influence over the world culture, language, custom, wisdom, etc. They are not the sudden superpowers of today, but remain so from the very ancient history. Nowadays, the relationship between China and India seems changing with multiple dimensions. A few weeks ago, both the countries faced skirmishes on the bank of Pangong Lake in Galwan Valley. After the 45 consecutive years of hot war between the parties, recently, Indian government banned some famous gadget applications launched and managed from China. The boycott of Chinese goods is in rumor in some ultra-nationalist masses, backed by even the governing party of India. The issue seems more complicated while the US Foreign Secretary Mike Pompeo intended to deploy US Army to India, cutting the troops from Germany just to look for China. A serious question rises here about the Western interest regarding the neighbors' conflict in the rising Asian region. China and India have numerous dimensions of relations, but for the current discussion, I think this can be pointed out in six different issues, mainly trade relations, border issues, bilateral and multilateral engagements, Pakistan issues, different ambitions of its nations, and some other issues like climate change and Asian regional issues, etc. Nepal is privileged to be a neighbor of China and India, the major regional powers in Asia, two most populous countries and fastest growing major economies in the world. A never colonized country, Nepal mostly enjoys cordial relationships with both of them from the ancient history. For instance, Lord Buddha was born in Nepal, enlightened in India, and impelled the masses of peace to East Asia through China. Similarly, Nepal was one of the principal trade routes from the very initial period to conduct trade activities between China and India. Having said all those things, there is always a fear in Nepal that it needs caution to treat them both China and India because there is a threat to Nepal for both the options, either in their close relationship or the diligent enmities. For example, China and India issued a joint statement from Beijing in 2015 mentioning Nepali land, Lipu Lake, without the consent of Nepal as the trade route between them. If they face strong enmities, Nepal and the South Asian region has to pay a lot from such unrest, as it is dependent on trade, transit, and commute to the rest of the world with these two neighbors. Now, without taking much more time, let me raise a few questions in front of all the speakers before giving the floor to the speakers. Is the present Indian government failed maintaining friendly relationship with neighbors that has been maintained so far before? Is their Western maneuvering responsible to increase the deterioration of the relationship between the great Asian powers? Is it China who violated the peace that has been maintained by the parties for 45 consecutive years? Is this a message to India by China as a rise of a global leader? The Galwan Valley tension emerged on, I guess, 15 to 16, 2020. Was this a skirmish or a strategic plan for either one of the parties? There was a voice in India to boycott the Chinese goods. Government of India officially banned popular apps as well. We have already mentioned this. Can India stand without the Chinese goods or trade with China? India nowadays seems very close to the Western powers, very active in Quad Plus and leaning towards US strategy of Indo-Pacific region. Subsequently, is there a tough choice for India to either align with IPS or with BRI? Is India moving towards USA side after the incident of Galwan Valley and tussle between the two parties? With all these remarks, let me open the floor for the speakers. And firstly, I would like to request to speak on the issue to Dr. Jagannath P. Panda. Dr. Panda, the floor is yours for 20 minutes.
Thank you. Very good afternoon from New Delhi. Let me at the outset thank Nepal Institute of International Relations in Kathmandu for this invitation. Thank you, Ambassador Leelamani Padwal. I also thank at the outset General Secretary Mr. Sunil Kumar Padwal for this invitation. My sincere thanks to Mr. Yogaraj Chulagoan for arranging this meeting. I'm happy to attend this meeting with my old good friend from Shanghai, Professor Chang Chia Tong. I have a very good tie with him for many years. Unlike India-China bilateral relations, we do have a very good understanding academically, but maybe today I will try to differ with him just for the clarity of discussion and for a better clarity of thought on the issues for which India and China are fighting today. Now, let me begin by saying that the views belongs to me, not to my institute or to any other affiliating institutes that I am associated with. The speech that I am delivering here entirely belongs to me. Now, as we all of us, we know that the geopolitical environment in the Himalayan region is currently very unstable. It is unfortunate that at a time when the world is involved in fighting with the COVID-19 pandemic, tensions are on a rise in the Himalayas. The current Indian border standoff has both bolstering their military presence at the line of actual control in Galwan Valley, leaving the Himalayan Valley on high alert. Nationalist sentiments on both sides only complicate the issue further. It is unfortunate that Nepal is facing the ramification in some ways due to its precarious geopolitical. And we know if we talk about the current India-China tensions, I think the core here is the perception, the perceptual difference on the line of actual control. I must make a point at the beginning that the recent action by the Chinese troops have little to do with the technicalities of the line of actual control and more to do with President Xi Jinping's national consolidation strategy in the post-COVID-19 period at a time when the spotlight domestically, domestically is on China's poor governance in terms of handling the COVID-19 pandemic. That means would, I would believe at this moment that probably China is currently intensifying the situation with India, keeping the pandemic in view. We know that between India and China, the line of actual control has been the differentiating point for a long time. But I think this is not the right time to create such tensions and continue with such a tension for a long time. From India's point of view, I think the root of the heightening tensions and uncertainty in the Himalayan Valley lies in China's aggressive military posture. Even if China has attempted to shift the blame on India, citing the example that India's movement of troops at the line of actual control as a move, resulted to the tensions, and due to the construction of the bridge that has really caused the tensions. But I think the issue is somewhere else. If we try to understand from India's point of view, this is not the first time India is creating a road or trying to strengthen its border infrastructure. I think we are building border infrastructure for a long time on our side of the LAC, line of actual control, and China should respect that. This is continuing for a long time, and the current border infrastructure are part of Prime Minister Modi's Bharatmala project. It is not only happening in the India-China border regions, but it is happening in other parts of India. So China should understand that point. I think if we take into account the tensions, China's actions are strangely reminiscent of the 73-day long Doklam border standoff in 2017, wherein China attempted to unilaterally claim territory in Bhutan, and India opposed to its aggression. So the current standoff is a resultant of the similar aggressive posturing by China. So I would suggest that, and I would argue that under President Xi Jinping, China has all but abandoned its moderate approach to international politics and is attempting to shape the world order to its benefit, all while countries across the world dealing with the repercussion of the pandemic. A Chinese tense relationship with a US administration under Trump becomes worse. China is looking to firmly establish itself as a dominant power in the Himalayan region, also across Asia, and the tensions with India is a part of that strategy. And this evidence, if one looks at China's actions in the region as a whole, we see China as trying to assert itself on the Indian border, but also in the South China Sea and in the East China Sea, where it is relentlessly introducing to Japanese maritime borders to South maritime borders. In Hong Kong, with its draconian new national security law, and in Australia, with its attempt to use coercive diplomacy and influence domestic politics. Even in Nepal, as India-China tensions heighten, China is attempting to vigorously, albeit quietly, intervene in Nepal's politics and influence Nepal's Indian politics. While publicly portraying itself as a friendly neighbor, China is using its investment in Nepal to position itself in Nepal and promote its authoritarian governance ideology to pursue an anti-India policy. There is ample evidence which indicates that from China's off-the-record meetings with politicians of the Nepal's ruling Communist Party behind closed doors, to Chinese pressurizing of Nepalese media institutions to suppress content that is critical of and disparage China. And I believe our Nepalese friend should take a serious note of this, and they should not allow to spoil India-Nepal relations for a third country. China's rather expansionist policies in the South Asian neighborhood have serious implications. Not only do they risk setting back the already tense relationship between India and China, but also derailing stability in the regions. Its persistent shows of might and willingness to ignore international norms and standards like the one country, two system policy in Hong Kong, and use of what can be described as coercive diplomatic practices create uneasiness and distrust in Beijing. China's violation of the line of actual control, which up until now had been mutually agreed upon, and its disregard of the confidence building measures and the broader border peace and tranquility agreements that it has with India, signals that China is becoming a unreliable partner for India and for its neighbors. If there has, if there is to be any resemblance of stability in the Himalayan Valley regions, China must moderate its policies in the neighborhood. More importantly, I believe it needs to foster a constructive dialogue with the regional partners, including with India, that rebuilds trust and creates a common understanding that both parties explicitly. This will by no means be easy. In the past 20 years, India has experienced multiple instances of Chinese on the border and its non-observance of previously agreed upon protocols of engagement at disputed borders. Nevertheless, if India and China want peace in the region, the first step has to be initiating bilateral diplomatic dialogues in good faith. China has to readily demonstrate its commitment to peace, respect for the territorial integrity of its neighborhood, and its dedication to a stable regional order. Rather than focusing on competing interests, the states must explore opportunities for regional economic partnership and shared interest that would allow China to establish crucial ties and growing their economic relationship altogether with the South Asian regions and the broader Asian regions. The Galwan incident is actually also posing a test for India-Nepal relationship. Over the last year, the Kalapan border dispute has embittered the states against each other, even as they deal with populist opinions and nationalist sentiments of their own citizens. So therefore, both India and Nepal should be careful how they are behaving with each other. However, it is now more important than ever that the two states draw on their deep-rooted socio-economic, cultural, and military ties and look towards resolving the dispute through diplomatic talks. And I think that should be a priority for both India and Nepal. And I must also say that India and Nepal's futures are invariably intertwined. Nepal shares crucial trade links and an unparalleled special status with India. From Nepal's nationals in the Gurkha regiments to India's investment in the cross-border infrastructure to human resource development in Nepal, the neighbors have a long legacy of friendship and brotherhood, which are actually binding them together. So therefore, both India and Nepal should be mindful of any third party's actions in the bordering regions and should not allow them, allow any other third country, including China, to spoil the relationship. I think consequently, in deciding where Nepal should fall on the ongoing India-China border dispute, I believe that Kathmandu needs to look beyond the region at who its allies are in international arena. It must consider a revisionist China's behavior seriously towards its competing powers in the Indo-Pacific regions, US, Japan, and Australia, how China is actually at a very tenseful relationship with the other regions. So therefore, I think Nepal can be a bridge between India and China in order to promote a good neighborhood relationship among three countries, India, Nepal, and China. And I think that is critical, that is necessary for the Himalayan regions, for the South Asian regions, and for the broader Indo-Pacific regions. So I will conclude by saying that if Nepal wants to truly exemplify the spirits of diversification-centered foreign policy, it should look beyond treating China as an alternative to India on its relationship with other allies in the Indo-Pacific region, and more broadly on the international stage. So therefore, rather than paring to domestic political interests, the current Nepalese government has to evaluate its national interests carefully and thereby recalibrate its foreign policy. A good relationship with India is a foreign policy priority for Nepal. A good relationship with Nepal is also a foreign policy priority for India. Both India and Nepal should understand that. Similarly, if we talk about India and China, China is actually a #1 priority in Indian foreign policy. For good reasons, for bad reasons, but it is #1 priority in Indian foreign policy. China must understand that it is sharing a long border with India. It cannot continue to have a tenseful relationship with India. If it continues to have a tenseful relationship with India, it will be a drawback to, it will be a huge test to China's peaceful rights in the regions. And I think China should take a note of it. And also from India's point of view, I think India also needs to carefully craft a foreign policy towards China where a much more stable relationship with China can be maintained. I will stop here and I thank you for listening to me. I will welcome your comments and questions during the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Jagannath Panda, for your insightful remarks. We will come back to you with some questions once this first round ends. Now we will go to Professor Chang Xiaodong for his deliberation. Dr. Chang?
Yes, I'm fine. Okay. Thank you very much for our chairperson and for Nepal Institute of International Studies and for you organizing this very interesting, very important online small meeting. So, and also thanks to my good friends, Indian friends, Jagannath Panda, and for your very frank arguments. So, yeah, I'll use all of my 20 minutes. So firstly, I want to say something about border disputes between China and India. And frankly, border issue in China's diplomatic agenda is just on a very low priority. It's not a very high priority. And not much Chinese leaders' attention have been paid to border issue. And China's top priority is still how to manage, how to handle our relations with the US, with other developed countries. So our country's general approach, general policy for border issue with India is maintain stability. I have never said any people from governments and say any aggressive or any active word about border issue. So I want to make it very clearly. And the Chinese is highest goal is to maintain stability and peace in the border area. And in India, between China, India, between China, Nepal, between China and every other neighbors, you can see China have solved the border disputes with most of our land neighbors, including Nepal, including Russia. And just the two countries left, India and Bhutan. Actually, between China and Bhutan, we once almost reach a resolution, agreements. It's just because India stopped Bhutan. And I say it, I have strong evidence. So biggest issue between China and India. Why this year, this unhappy, very bad issue happened? So many people died. I think we should originated this back to 3 years ago, is Dokala incident. So Dokala incident is a really bad issue for the region, specifically for India, because the Dokala region is not any relevant to India. It's not the dispute between China and India, and is China's territory, sometimes claimed by Buddha, is irrelevant to India. But the Indian army entered into China territory, into this disputed between, not between China and India. So it is a very different situation happened, very different situation since the color issue, because India crossed two red lines. The first is the sovereign red line, and the second is between China and India. We have said for many years, our bilateral relations not relevant to third party, just the bilateral. But India break these two red lines. So to understand this year's issue, we must remember the color issue. So in the past few years, I think Indian side has changed very much, and within your borders, and it's also about your foreign policy. And you can see Indian lot of change about your constitution, about Kashmir's status, about minority status, lots of changes. I think we can say in India, a new kind of political situation has been built. And some people say it's Hindu nationalism. Frankly, in China side, we also have some kind of nationalism. So if both countries have some kind of nationalism, and both countries have a stronger capability to maintain, to portray along LOC, and it should be very hard. It should be very hard for government, for soldiers to control situation. It's much easier to something bad thing happen. And it's what we can see, what's in Galwan Valley region, and between Chinese army and the Indian army, a bad issue happened. I do not think, and from our side, from Indian side, I think both sides not any intention to kill other people, but many people died, not because we want to kill, it's because of very harsh environments, you know, and Galwan Valley region is very high, and is very cold, and is shortage of oxygen, so it's very easy for even just for very light injury where lead to death. So it's a very different situation. So it's why I say it is something not a must happen. It's something not a must happen, and it's an accidental issue. It's just my general understanding for border dispute between China and India. I think both sides understand the situation, and it's not any necessary. It's not in the interest of both China and India, and in this region to happen a military confrontation, to military conflicts is not in our two countries' interest. So, but this issue is generally relevant to another big issue. Another big issue is China and India as two rising power. To rising power, lots of issues happened, lots of issues changed. I think Dr. Jagannath Panda mentioned China's policy change. I think most of the list that you mentioned is right, but actually India is also changing very much. You can see Indian foreign policy become more active, proactive, and India have never forced the policy, and the never forced policy means India's neighbor must put India on the top priority. So in lots of issues change. So for two rising powers, their relationship should be very hard to manage, not very easy issue to manage two rising power. So actually, since the end of the Cold War, China and India rebuilt our relationship with a very pragmatic attitude, and we let border issue just there. Then we develop our cooperation and in other arenas. So we once built a very nice environment between China and India. But since 2013, 2014, when new governments, Indian governments happen, and the Indian army, Indian become more active or more assertive, and in some cases even more aggressive. So you can see more and more border issue happen between China and India. So sometimes I think this issue is not an isolated issue. And this issue, we should put it into a much broader arena between China and India. Today, the real issue between China and India, I don't think is really border issue. It's really between two ruling power about the limited regional strategic competition. You can see China Navy is already in Indian Ocean. You can see Indian Navy is already traveled and sailed in South China Sea, in East China Sea. So it's a lot of new issues happened. And India friends like to say trade imbalance, but actually a kind of strategic competition is already happened between our two countries. So border issue is really not a real, is a very sensitive issue, not the most important issue. So how to understand this? The first, I think, is natural for our neighbors, two bigger neighbors, is a very natural phenomenon to happen, to have some kind of competition. Yeah, but I don't think competition is a bad issue. Sometimes maybe it's a good issue. And in reality, between China and India, and lots of we can see lots of actual issues, and trade issue, border issue, water issue, river issue, and many others. And we can list many. But I want to say another issue. I do believe currently, both in China and India, we have some misunderstanding about the situation, about each other's strategic intention. Firstly, I find that in both China and India, in our two countries, we can see lots of people, they like to overestimate their own country's capability. They like to overestimate their own country's power. It's very interesting. And in Beijing, in Delhi, we can see a lot of people. And some people in China say China very strong, and some people in India say India very strong. We should have more thing to get. So it's not true. The second misunderstanding is in both sides, and lots of people, it also overestimates the other side's strategic hostility. And in our side, some people say India become ally of United States, and we are joining U.S. alliance to contain China, and we should fight back against India. And in Indian side, you can also see similar judgments, and China is using every power to encircle India, and India should do something against China. I think both sides overestimates hostility between China and India, and not so bad. Of course, not so good, and it's also not so bad. So we should change these two misperceptions. China and India are rising, but is yet to be world power. We are still being developing countries. And our two countries, the main task is not to go to international political arena to compete for higher international status. And it's one goal, but shouldn't be in our top priority. Our two countries' top priority is still we should continually focus on economic development. I don't think, and it's very important for strategic issue. The real issue for China, for India, for Nepal, for every country in the region, it is the economy. We should economy first, not the other issue first. Of course, and I can say it's easy, but how can we achieve this goal? It's very hard. We are still facing lots of challenges. I have several points about China and India. First, I suggest both sides, China and India, should accurately position their international status. We are not a world power. We are not the United States. We are not the developed countries as in Japan. We are still developing countries. We have so much big sum of people need to feed. This is a very hard task. So we must understand this. Secondly, I believe both countries should formulate a people-oriented policies. And we talk too much about strategic, about security, about foreign policy, and we talk less about the people's need. And both countries' people need economy, need a job, need money, need a chance, need education, need this. And specifically, we are in the pandemic situation. The pandemic is threatening every country. So I don't think it's a good time for us to happen any border disputes, any border conflicts in this area. And the third point, I think both China and India should look at each other from a historical perspective. Border line is created by European countries. In the past, there is no borderline between China and India, even no borderline between India and Nepal. And between countries, we have very big buffer zone, and not necessary in ancient times we draw a line on the map. It's created by European countries. But you can see what happened in European countries. Within EU, their borderline importance is reduced to low points, and the people can go into borderline and without obstacles. So European created borderline. European is also obsolete borderline. So if we change something, look with you, we will see borderline maybe not important. So I think we should change our mindset, and we should change something based on sovereign states. We should have a new thing and a new arguments based on culture and history. And the borderline is not a wall separate two countries. Borderline should become a bridge to link two countries. Then issue should be much easy to happen. So how about Nepal? So Nepal is just a small brother between two bigger brothers, and I understand for Nepal it's very hard to manage your policies, your relationship with China and India. But I do not think Nepal must choose any side. Nepal is a sovereign country, and I think Nepal, until today, Nepal's foreign policy is still keep a balanced policy and keep good relationship with China, with India at the same time. Even not very easy, but still doing well, I think. So Nepal, for this point, I agree with Jagannath. Nepal should become a bridge between China and India, and Nepal should become a bridge corridor between China and India. And more cooperation, more exchange, I think, and for South Asia, for between China and India, and they should become more stable and more peaceful. And I think stability and peace is something we both sides need, and is a precondition for economic development. So may I stop here? Thank you very much.
All right, Professor Chan, for your deliberation. I think you too maintain your time limits very well. So now we will go to Mr. Lilamani Paudel for his deliberation. Sir, you can start now.
Thank you, Mr. Chaulagai, and good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for organizing this important meeting and also inviting me to share some of my thoughts. I would also like to express my pleasure for having opportunity to listen the well-learned to eminent speakers before me. A lot of things they have already spoken. That's why I may not have to speak in detail, and then I have not prepared any written text. That's why I will speak offhand some bullet points I have taken. Let me talk about the, based on the previous speakers, I would just like to pick up some of the points mentioned. The relationship between Nepal and India first. India, our total trade, almost 2/3 takes place with India, and then have a more than 1,800 kilometer long border, open border. Thousands of years of history of exchanges between people, and there is a very strong cultural affinity and relationship. Many people travel each other's places for religious purpose, and there is also family ties as well. And the millions of people from India to Nepal and Nepal to India crisscross. They are working in either countries. And the figures in 2018, the remittances. The Nepal receives more than 1.3 billion US dollar remittance from India, and the India receives more than 3.1 billion US dollar from Nepal. That is what gives some sort of the glimpse of the relationship that we have with India. And the India is the only country that provides transit facility for Nepal, being a landlocked country. That's why the relationship with India and Nepal's relationship with India is very much important for Nepal. Talking with the China, and the China is the only neighbor that apart from India, and we have more than 1,400 kilometers long border, and the very long historical and cultural relationship with the very strong cultural affinity as well. Through Buddhism and the civilizational exchanges in centuries. China is the largest source for foreign direct investment at this moment, and the second largest source for tourists, and the one of the largest development partner. I mean that provides the development support for Nepal. At present, very large number of the almost fourth or fifth largest number of Nepalese students are studying in China in the different universities and getting higher level educations and also coming back to southern Nepal. Talking these parameters, and then Nepal cannot afford to have the either or relationship. And as Mr. Panda just mentioned that the Nepal should not seek the alternatives of India to any others. So Nepal never sorts like that of alternatives of relationship. Nepal wants to expand relationship, and with both the neighbors, not only with both the neighbors, will try to expand its relationship with other countries as well in the world. Nepal has no enemy, no animosity with any countries in the world. That's why there are only friends. Nepal has only friends. Nepal wants to expand its relationship with China in terms of economy, culture, trade, tourism. And for that, definitely wants to maintain a good harmonious relationship in political level as well, and the builds trust as well. Both the countries has concern. China and India, both countries has a concern over Nepal. They always talk about their sensitivities and security interest. India talks about the security interest being open border for unregulated border. And the China also, we have the very sensitive part of China's sensitive part, the Tibet Autonomous Region in our border. That's why the China also definitely has the concern of their security in the Nepal. That's why Nepal always try to maintain a good harmonious relationship with both the countries, not at the expense of others, but the continuously expand the relationship, and the also listen their concerns and try to address their genuine legitimate concerns and the interest as well. while serving their legitimate interest and concerns. And then we sometimes face some sort of the suspicions and doubts and sometimes allegations from the other partners. And then at that time, we have to use our diplomatic acumen to convince the other partner that it was a right approach that we have been taking place and then taken, and then there is nothing against another neighbor or another friendly country. That should have our approach, and then we should try, and then we tried in the past, and then we should try in the future as well. If any kinds of the conflict arises between India and China, and the being a very disproportionately big in terms of geography, in terms of economy, and in terms of military power, the ramification definitely would come to Nepal. Although the other South Asian countries will equally impacted, may be impacted, not equally, but the Nepal will be the most sufferer of any kinds of the conflicts between China and India. That's why Nepal, by its action and by its behavior and by its intention, should try to do any kinds of the favor, or they try to reduce the tensions between our two friendly neighbors. While doing so, and then we must gain their trust as well. If we could not gain a trust, in that case, we cannot play any kinds of the mediating role or the easing tensions. And then sometimes there are some misnomers, particularly not in China, but in India. Some Indian academicians and policymakers and think tanks, and sometimes that most of the bureaucrats, and then they have the poor understanding about Nepal, and then they sometimes put some allegations on Nepal for their genuine concerns and some sort of the legitimate concerns as well. Particularly when there comes the relationship with China, they used to see with suspicion that Nepal is replacing with India from China. And that is nothing like that. We have the too much integration with India and then less integration with China. But the China is a growing economic power, and then it has more capability to cater the needs of its neighboring countries and the other developing countries in terms of its economic power, and then it has devised some mechanisms for supporting countries like Belt and Road initiatives. While joining with the Belt and Road initiative, some countries might have got that kind of grievances. The documents written in Belt and Road initiatives clearly mentions that this cooperation is basically for the promotion of the connectivity between two economies, Chinese economy and the economy that they are going to cooperate with. And particularly in terms of, if we're talking about Nepal and China, it is connectivity between China and Nepal. And then maybe possible in the region as well. Through the connectivity, they want to boost the investment, they want to boost the trade, and then they want to boost the economic opportunities, cultural exchanges, and the people-to-people contact. Through that, and then there will be more understanding among the people. They will explore the more opportunities for the economic benefits, create the job opportunities, and then that will stabilize the economy. Through that will help the socio-political. And the socio-political staying a very strange comparison to people, although in terms of the global size, we are not very small. Our population is a little bit larger than Australia. And the being prosperous, Nepal is in the interest of China, India as well, not only China. If we bring some investment from China and then Nepal becomes richer, out of $1 we spend for foreign trade, 70 cents goes to India. If our trade volume becomes 2 times, if that proportionately that the trade volume goes with increases with India, India's trade benefit from Nepal's the additional created wealth will also be doubled. If not proportionately goes that, and then even then definitely there will be spillover. The huge benefits for India will derive from Nepal's prosperity, and also from the stability as well. Being having a long and open border, if there are some socio-political instabilities, there will have a spillover effect on India as well. And if there is a socio-political stability, and that will have the stability that will contribute for the stability in the bordering region, and then will be a conducive environment for the socio-economic development. That's why the India and Nepal and China, both the countries can work together for creating the win-win situation by having that socio-political stability in the region and the promoting economic integration, not disintegration. Creating conflicts rather than creating conflicts, and that they all can be the winner by having that cooperations jointly together. I have a little bit different perspective on the Mr. Panda mentioned that China's investment is against India's interest. And then if there are that kinds of things, and that should come with substantiated with some evidences. There are some false allegations. What happened is that in the early 1990s, when we were trying to build a road from the connecting western part in the Tarai region, and we opened a bid, international competitive bidding, and the Chinese contractor won the bid. But there was an objection from India that for the construction, and they said that they will make that road themselves. But they took almost 25 years to complete that road. And then we suffered a lot from scattering the needs and expansion, the development activities in the far western regions, and the far western region lagged behind in the development indices in these days. And therefore, that any kinds of the Chinese investment, the India should not take as a suspicion for Nepal has taken on against the India's interest. Nepal cannot take any move against the India's security concerns and interest. Never. If that India comes with some core evidences, Nepal should be ready to sit together and discuss those matters and resolve amicably. And the one very misnomer in India is that, particularly in this very recent dispute with India on the Kalapani issue, that is there since the early 1950s. We should say the early 1950s, but we started demarcation, delineation of the border in 1980s only, and formally we constituted a committee and started on that. And that border issue is there since 1980. We continuously raising this issue, and even that in the Prime Minister Modi's visit to Nepal, and then Nepali Prime Minister's visit to India in 2015, they discussed this matter and then constituted a committee, and then given that mandate to the Foreign Secretary's level committee to resolve that outstanding matter. And the Nepal always tried to pursue that, to hold a meeting several times, and then we could not hold the meeting because of that. India was not ready to sit and discuss this matter. And this time too, and Nepal was asking for the meetings, and both the countries have agreed in 2014 that they constitute a group of eminent experts and then prepare a report and then submit the report to both the governments. The eminent experts, 3 from India and 3 from Nepal, they prepare a report, consensus report, and that report is pending. That could not be submitted, and then India is not ready to receive that report, even submitted by the experts nominated by themselves. And then the border issues could have resolved quite earlier if India was shown a preparedness to do that, and then there would not have any issue remain for such kinds of the conflict that arises now. And in the last November, when that the dispute was already there was no need to make that such a very big fanfare, and then the defense minister inaugurate the road, opening that through the border, through the disputed border points, the Nepal's claimant over that area. And then that triggered a kind of anger in the Nepali community. And the Nepalese community were felt that India is bullying against Nepal on its territory, grabbing territory, and then denying to sit on negotiations, and then not accepting the report prepared by the experts, together jointly prepared by both the eminent experts appointed by both of them. And then they feel really somehow that bully by India. And then the Nepalese government sent a note that with India, and then claiming that that area, that road constructed area is Nepal's claim, and then Nepal wants to resolve that matter through dialogue and want to sit for dialogue. But India denied to respond even that later. Nepal is a sovereign country, older than United States, independent sovereign country. India should respect the Nepal sovereign entity and then independent authority to take decision on its territorial integrity, right over the claiming right over that land, territorial land. That is there. And then when that the recent conflict arises with China, and they started blaming China that the Nepal took this matter with the instigation and the provocation of China. That is really will not help anymore resolve that outstanding issue. We don't want to pull China in this matter. Definitely, when we resolve that Kalapani issue bilaterally, and then the India, China, and Nepal should sit together to fix the trilateral junction. That is a long way to go, because that first India, China has to resolve their border as well before fixing the trilateral junctions. That's why we don't see that there is a very, very near future they will be able to fix that border disputes, and then we will fix the trilateral junctions. Before that, and then we don't want to pull China on that controversy. Although that Mr. Adhikari mentioned the 2015's that agreement between India and China for doing border trade through the Lipu Lake area, and then that triggered a kind of anger in Nepali community, and the Nepalese government sent a note to both the countries that is a part of Nepal, and then should not be India and China should not have the signed agreement without Nepal's consent for the border trade. That kinds of letter we've already sent to India, and then India should have avoided doing any kinds of the other activities in that area, and then should sit together, convince Nepal that if India has a proof and claims over that area, and then should have sit together and then convince Nepal. And there is nothing impossible to convince if there are hardcore evidences with India. And then denying sitting together, and the issue become complicated. When we took up this matter on our own independently, and then started to alleging Nepal that it's provocated to China. You have the problem with China, and then you can directly deal with it. Don't bring in Nepal in between, because Nepal don't have capability to absorb the shocks that arises from the any kinds of the big conflicts between India and China. Basically, after that, the Galwan Valley conflict between India and China, Nepal definitely will have the spillover impact, and then already Nepal felt a very tremendous pressure of maintaining a very tricky balance between two countries. And we hope and wish that both our friendly neighbors, we can maintain a good harmonious relations. The neighbors, if we hope and wish that both countries resolve that outstanding matters through the dialogue, and they would not go for any kinds of the confrontation. Armed confrontation will have the very serious consequences on both of them for their socio-economic development, stability, and even global stability and global economic prospects. COVID-19 itself has severely damaged the global economy, and many countries are not been able to revive economy, and then India, Nepal these days are still facing the rising number of the COVID pandemic cases, and the economy are locked down, and then lots of the economic activities are already been collapsed, and then large number of people have lost their jobs, and then people working outside from India and Nepal, they are returning back, and then we have a lot of other problems we need to handle. And then there is I think there is no any, we have that luxury of involving on the border conflicts. And China does not have even. China has a conflict with United States and trade conflicts, and the continuously declining trade with US, and then having conflict with the European countries. And then China also don't have, I think, interest to involve in any kinds of the conflict with India in the border. And that's why this time after that, the Galwan Valley conflicts, Chinese media remain a little bit not very noisy, and then calm and composed, and then little provocative, and then the Indian media. Talking about the impact of the any kinds of the arms conflict, I don't see that there is a possibility, because This is none of the interest, neither interest of India, nor interest of China, nor interest of the neighboring countries. I don't think that it should be the interest of United States as well. If even they think strategically that conflict between India and China would be in the is the benefit of United States, that is a kind of the a mistake, because that global economy will severely impacted, and that impacts will not remain within the boundary of India and China. That will have the severe impact on United States and Europe globally. There will be a global recession, and then there will be a global level conflicts. Recession will create a lot of job loss, and then there will be domestic violences, domestic internal violences, conflicts within the countries, and the other bordering conflicts. And that will, the world is so globally integrated, and then no one can afford to have that kinds of the face off or the arms conflict between the world's the most promising two economies in the world, and the also the very big the military power in the world, and the economic power as well. It will be detrimental in the human history. It will be a very big disaster for the human history if they go for war. And then they have that they are wise. The leaders of both the countries are wise enough to avoid any kinds of the arms conflict. But I don't see that ex ante that May 5 position that would come in near future between India and China, because that they have moved, particularly India has taken some reactionary measures, immediately reactionary responses. That would have the long-term implications on the regional cooperations and conflict, and Nepal would be happy to work together with them, but it depends on the trust of both of our neighbors. Some of the Nepali intellectuals talk that Nepal should be the mediator for the conflicts between India and China. And then this is a wishful thinking only. I don't see that is possible in Riyadh right now, because the Nepal is a serious conflict with India because of that border issue these days. And then if there is a serious conflict on the one party with another, and then cannot be a mediator. The mediator must have the know any confrontational issues with both the confronting parties. On that case only Nepal can play a role. Even that when the United States was asking for the mediation, and both the countries had said that no, they don't want to involve any third parties, and then Russia also try to somehow that bring together them, and then not also a mediation, but Russia also said that resolve matters through bilaterally through dialogues, but try to create a conducive environment for dialogues and then sitting together. And then that was a good move from Russia taken on that context. And then after the Russian somehow the facilitation, and then they started the withdrawing, the de-escalation of the tensions, and then a demobilization of the armies from the border. Saying so, and then if there is even then if there is a arms conflict, this time Nepal would definitely.
Sir, you have to sum up.
Yeah, okay. I will finish in 1 or 2 minutes time. Nepal would, if there is a kind of conflict, Nepal should, and then Nepal will remain independent or neutral, and then try to ease the de-escalate the tension between two countries, and then will not take part any sides. And then saying so, there are very large number of more than 30,000 armies in India, and then according to my knowledge of the tripartite agreement between Nepal and India, and then Britain for the recruitment of the Gorkha regiments, the Gorkha regiment should not be used for any friendly country. Earlier that happened, although Nepal did not denied, did not protested in writing for the use of the Gorkha armies in the war sometime in the Pakistan border and the in the 1962 with China as well. But this time, having conflict with India in the border issues and then tensions and then very strong anti-Indian sentiments are growing. This is not because of any others instigated. This is just because don't blame any politicians in Nepal. This conducive environment created by India because of the lack of negotiation, lack of dialogue, sitting for dialogue, that has created this situation. And then we should try to reduce this situation as early as possible. If that kinds of conflict arises, there will be a strong pressure for Nepal to stop any Gorkha recruitment in India, and then ask India to not to use for China. That kinds of the demand may come up very strongly in Nepal, because that in Doklam issue, in that Kalapani issue, all the Nepalese political parties united together to pass the amendment bill in the constitution for that incorporating that part in our Nepali map. That's why there is a unity among all political parties in Nepal. India should respect that Nepali people's right to talk about the claim about that border issues, but that claim is not the final. We should sit together and then see the evidences, and then whatever evidence is proven, and then both can reduce the tension, and then we can play a catalyst role for reducing tensions between our two friendly neighbors, India and China. I will be happy to take up any questions on that, whatever I've spoken to the eminent experts or any other participants in the today's seminar. With this, I would like to say once again, thank you very much. I stop right now.
All right, thank you. Thank you, sir. Actually, you have benefit that 2-3 minutes of each speaker has left time, so you get little more. Thank you for your insightful remarks. So without further delay, I guess we have to quickly jump on to the questions that has been posted by the participants. I guess all the speakers can read the questions in the question box. So I will take a question to maybe Dr. Panda. Dr. Panda, I think you are listening me.
Yes.
India has been offensive to Nepal and defensive to China in a similar issues of territorial disputes. However, the nature of dispute is different. Will you please share your views why India doesn't want Nepal in a trilateral forum to settle the issue among the three? Yeah, this is the question.
Okay. If I correctly understood the question, you are talking about which particular issue? Can you just repeat it?
Yeah, this is about the territorial dispute of border.
Okay.
India is being offensive to Nepal and defensive to China. This is the question on why is so, and why you not just sit on the table for the dialogue. This is the question.
I think we have to say that, territory is the prime of a country. Each country, be it India, be it Nepal, be it China, I think territorial integration remains the final bottom of sovereignty line of thinking. So no country would like to have any compromise when it comes to making any concession or enter into a zone where you cannot really have a better negotiation. That is number one. Number two, I think one has to see whether the territorial conflicts that we are talking about, is it really meritorious to become and discussed in a trilateral forum? Can't India and Nepal resolve this issue bilaterally between them? do they really need a third party to interfere? So my view here is that when it comes to territorial issues, it is really important for Nepal as much as India. And if you see from the Britishers' period, from 18th century onwards, I think both India and Nepal have respected the way they are located geographically, even after the independence. So this issue has only been resurfaced in recent times. Earlier, there was absolutely no conflict. So why we want to have a trilateral forum to resolve this issue when India and Nepal are competent neighbors to solve this problem bilaterally? Number two, I don't think there is a forum at this moment exists which really talks about all the problems between India, China, and Nepal. So we cannot only talk about this particular issue. I think first India and Nepal needs to, because the issue is between India and Nepal more than between issue is between India, Nepal, and China. It's no more a trilateral dispute. It is a primarily differentiating issues at the national level in terms of perception between India and Nepal. So let's not make it a trilateral issue. And I think it is between India and Nepal to decide and agree upon a bilateral forum before we move it to the trilateral forum. So I would conclude by saying that we are not opposing in principle to a trilateral forum to discuss this border issue, conflicting issues among the three countries. But before that, I think as a good neighbor, as India holds Nepal under a good neighbor policy, and also the way Nepal is dependent on India as a good neighbor, the issue needs to be discussed between India and Nepal first before it becomes a trilateral issue, before we make it to the issue under a trilateral forum. I think my response to the query is that.
Yeah, thank you. So another question to Professor Chan. What in your opinion can be the mono objective of the rising powers, India and China of Asia, for the reason rather than conflicting each other?
Very good question. I think I totally believe it's a crucial issue between China and India. And maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and the China-India relationship is a really bilateral issue. But today, China-India relationship is become a regional issue, international issue. So I find both sides, from scholars to leaders, little bit kind of understand situation. Because some people like to use bilateral perspective to understand regional and international issue. So this is a challenge sometimes for both sides, the decision makers and scholars. I do believe that currently and what happened between China and India, the most because strategic competition. I call it a premature strategic competition. Premature means China, India is yet to be developed country, is yet to be real world power. But some people like to use world powers perspective to understand the situation. Then they will overestimate their own capability, they will overestimate the other side hostility. So it's why I mentioned during my presentation, we should change our arguments. We should change our perspective. If China and India just following, just keep current foreign policy, current perspective, should be very, very hard for both sides to maintain a rising powers relationship. You can see lots of bad record for this kind of issue. And in European history, when Germany and France rising at the same time, lots of issues happened. And in the Pacific, prior to World War II, and one side is US, another side is Japan, the two rising navy, two rising power, and then World War happened. So I think Chinese and Indian, we are also have ancient civilization. I think we can get lots of lessons from the history to avoid and this kind of strategic confrontation. Of course, competition I think is natural, but confrontation I don't think it is natural. But currently, we are facing some domestic issue in both China and India. And I mentioned, I think Dr. Panda also mentioned, nationalism is also rising, following two countries rising. And when two countries rise, should be more difficult to control nationalism rising. It's some big issue. Of course, this issue not just for China, India. You can see similar situation in lots of big countries, big powers. So specifically for India, because India's public opinion is very different from China, and it's very easy to stir some domestic confrontational opinion. And for example, just in the past 2 months, and a lot of standoff between China and India. Is every time when this standoff happened, the first report must come from Indian side. Then Chinese side will follow Indian's reports. Then it's very natural, it's very frequent happened confrontation become a really very hard issue in both countries' medias. Then these reports, these medias will promote nationalism rising. Then rising of nationalism will push government very hard. And that government is very hard to make any kind of compromise. So I suggest our Indian friends, you should regulate your army, your soldiers, and should not play public opinion against each other. And the public opinion is very easy to stir, but it is very hard to manage. And is specifically for Indian side. I know Indian side is very different political system from China, and very different practice of freedom of speech. So, but you can control your army because for the LOC, most of the LOC, there are scarce of people. No, in most of the regions, even no telephone, no mobile message. If your army, your soldiers can keep secrets, can keep something low profile, I think it should be much easier for both countries to manage public opinion, to manage rise of nationalism. So I do believe rise of two countries is good, but rise of nationalism in two countries are bad. We should avoid bad thing and to promote good thing. Okay.
Thank you. So we will take another question. Maybe this is to Mr. Jagannath Panda. Mr. Jagannath said, India is not and never influences internal affairs in Nepal. Why are you pointing only at China without giving a fair self-confession? Would you like to respond, or you can skip as well?
No, I think it's better to answer because I think I have told you, this is my personal opinion. My intention is not here to hurt our Nepalese friend or hurt my good friend Chang Chatang. I think the intention here is to have a good discussion. And I think we should appreciate that. Even though the question is not really in good positive taste, but I think
this question is not by a Nepali. Maybe this is a foreigner.
Okay.
I'm sure, but
I think okay. Let me see. I think it's not about India is being unfair to Nepal, or India is not really acknowledging that there is an influence exists. Indian influence exists in Nepal. I think all the big powers or better economies have a better leverage over their smaller economic neighbors. That is the radical truth. Look at China. China is not only today having a better influence over all the bordering neighboring countries, but also many other countries across the world. So similarly, India, even though is not really a that big economy of 13 trillion economy like China, but we still are a competent economy, which is very close to 3 trillion economy. And I think we do have a stronger economic leverage, economic influence in Nepal, not only in Nepal, but also in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, in Myanmar, in many other neighboring countries, extended neighboring countries. So it depends on how we interpret it. If we historically, such an interference, such an economic and trade ties was looked down as a positive note, on a positive note. But today it is looked down on a negative note because of the competing nationalism, because of the geopolitical environment, because of the power politics. So it depends how you interpret the issue. But the inevitable truth is Nepal is dependent on India as much as India would like to have a support from Nepal. And that is the radical truth. So if we try to put a negative connotation to it by saying that India is trying to interfere in the Nepal's domestic internal affairs, then I think it is just an unfortunate thing for India-Nepal relation. And I think this situation is only going to compound further. India's economy would be rising further. India's influence in global geopolitics will be rising further. And let's take a note of a practical fact that today, US, Japan, Australia, many countries in Southeast Asia, they don't want to engage with India only for a fact that India is an important country in South Asia or India is an important country in Indo-Pacific. They want to engage with India because India is a competent economy, India is a competent power, and India is one of the successful democracy in the world. And India has got enormous influence across the world. So I think the immediate neighbors like Nepal also should take a good note of this fact, that why India is being liked and why India is being accepted globally. So I think there are ways to interpret this issue. And I think if we take into the geopolitics or rivalry, it is easy to say that India is trying to influence the internal affairs of Nepal. I don't really see it in that context. Every bigger economy or rising economy will have some kind of leverage over their immediate neighbors. I would look at this question from that point of view.
All right. I guess most of the questions are to you, Mr. Panda. Again, another question as well for you. What is going wrong with India? Are you listening me?
Yes, sir.
What is going wrong with India that she has border tensions with almost all of her border connecting neighbors? This is the question.
Okay. I work on China and Indo-Pacific, India-China relations and Indo-Pacific. Let me give an example. Let's take the example of South Korea and Japan. They don't have border problems. Japan has a maritime dispute with South Korea. South Korea has a dispute with Japan. They have historical problems. Let's take the example between China and Japan. They are neighbors. They do have age-old differences and disputes. Let's take the example of Russia and China. They still have territorial disputes. Let's take the example from history. China had a lot of historical dispute with most of the neighboring countries. Of course, some of them have been resolved. So it is one thing to say that why India is having these problems with the neighborhoods. I think our Nepalese friend will understand this point much better than us, that you tend to have, for good reasons or for bad reasons, you tend to develop difference of opinion with your immediate neighbors. Your immediate neighbors are always your best competitors. So therefore, what you are seeing today between India, Nepal, or India and other neighboring countries is a competing way of getting into the developmental modes. And I think that has been the most differentiating point. It's not the dispute on land or territory. Between India and Nepal, yes, Kalapani has become an issue recently. There are issues between India and Nepal, but these issues could be resolved given the reference of history and historical connection. Between India and Bhutan, I think because of China's interference, continuous interference, including the Doklam incident, the relationship between India and Bhutan has been damaged to some extent. But if you see it all this while, India has managed its relationship with Bhutan fantastically. Similarly, if you see between India and Bangladesh, there are issues from water sharing to many other issues. But look at the way the relationship is being managed. With Nepal, there has been ethnic issues. But look at the way India and Nepal, India and Sri Lanka relationship has been managed all this while. So, except I think relationship with Pakistan, which has not really been on a good note since independence, India's independence and Pakistan's independence. I think India's relationship with all its South Asian neighbors has been moderate. It has not been tenseful, even though from time to time the issues have come up to haunt their relationship with India. So it is also in the interest of these smaller South Asian countries to take a serious note of the rising space of India, the way India is rising in international forums and in Indo-Pacific regions, and take advantage of tying with India and with India's association. So everything cannot be seen in context of China. India-China relationship is on a different note. And I think I would agree with Professor Chang Chiatong here that I think India-China relation is no more only bilateral oriented. It has become global. It has become international. India-China relations has many facets. So the South Asian neighbors should take a strong note of that. That maybe the South Asian neighbors are doing a mistake in terms of involving themselves in a complicated narratives of India-China rivalry. And they will be the losers. Nobody is going to lose. And we have, in historical sense, we have seen when big powers fight, it's the small powers they economically suffer. So let's not really allow that kind of situation where our relationship will be spoiled. And I think there we need to care for India-Nepal relationship, and India values its association and relationship with Nepal. We should not be doing this mistake.
All right. Maybe it's better to, more brief because there are many questions. So briefer, the better. This question is for both Mr. Chang and Mr. Panda. Maybe Mr. Chang would respond first. This question goes both to Panda and Chang sir. No doubt China and India is a powerful country, but they have lots of problems like border issues, political issues, and somehow other problems too. And these things may depart the relations between India and China. If not solving these problems, how can you lead the world, even the regional power? Can you explain? This is the question. So please brief. Mr. Chang.
Okay. And China's experience to solve border disputes, and the logic is different from India. And for lots of Indian people, and they like to say, without resolution of border disputes, and we will be no way to build a good relationship. But for China, it is another way. For China, without a good relationship, how can we solve border disputes? Because border disputes relevant to territory issue, it is very, very sensitive. And if you remember China's history in resolution our border issue with other countries, in most cases, they are following this logic. For example, between China and Russia. And when China and Russia relationship become good, then we solve the border issue. Between China and Vietnam, the war can't solve, but a much good relationship between China and Vietnam, then we solved our border disputes. So it's approach difference between China's and India's. And India hold we must solve border issues because it's very, very complicated, complex situation, and for border issue between China and India. Without a strategic trust, without a good relationship, there's no way for us to talk. There's no way for both sides to make any kind of compromise. So I'm stopping here.
Right, Mr. Panda, the same question.
I think the time has come. I think we need to realize the fact that any kind of tensions are going to affect us, not only economically, but also in terms of our relationship, in terms of our socio-economic livings in the Himalayan regions. Countries will rise, be it Nepal's rise, be it India's rise, be it China's rise. Of course, I do hold a skeptical view about China's rights because I think China has risen as a power and it needs to really take the other neighboring countries' interest much more seriously in order to continue moving ahead and rise. But yes, India and Nepal will continue to rise, and I think we should not allow the border dispute or all of these military-centric views to dominate the national level relationship or the relationship that we have nurtured all this while in the Himalayan regions throughout the ages. The relationship is much more precious. Not a chunk of land should decide our relationship. And I think with both countries, particularly Nepal and India, we belong to the Himalayan regions. And we need to respect the Himalayan valleys in order to nurture and preserve the status quo in our relationship.
Thank you. Similarly, another question also to Mr. Panda. Why India is snubbing the EPZ report? Will it elevate the Nepal-India relations until it will be addressed and executed in the changing political reality? It's about the report of the EPZ, that's Eminent Person Group, that has been, you know that.
I don't think India is snubbing the EPZ report. I think the EPZ report has been prepared, keeping in view the respective views from both sides and from the eminent persons. So I don't think India is really discounting, but I think this EPZ report is just a consultative report. Expert people groups report is just a consultative report. It still do not have that official norm. So I think both the respective parties needs to execute it at the official level in order to make it happen. So I don't think India is really snubbing. India does care the EPG's report, the way it has been prepared. But I think we need to leave it at the official and political level to address the conflicts.
Then I guess it's better to hear from Leela Marisa. Yeah, this is my question to you, sir, because I think this one has not been here for you. What do you think the incident on Galwan Valley and the middle of May was the skirmishes? I mean, the sudden incident between these two parties, or this is a relative move by somebody? And will this lead them towards the further tension, or can they resolve it in their way?
Thank you, Mr. Saulagai. First, I have raised a hand just on the first question. Maybe it was raised by some Nepali about the trilateral involvement of
all right, yeah.
the issue on that Kalapani matter. because it is very important, and then I must respond on that.
All right, please. Please, sir.
So when I listen that question, and then I fully agree with the border issues. No, or third country can pass on a judgment or they involve on that issues, and it's not a good idea to involve China on that Kalapan issue. Some of the Nepali scholars even talked when with me, and then also have written articles that why is not speaking on this, and then why China is not a good friend, something like that. That comments any precedents in the these are territory, and then third country common, and then pass on the judgment. This country, this language, that country. That's really a bilateral matter. Some of the Indian also talk that this is because of the standards of Nepal raised, and then India, this is the Nepal issue. Nepal has been raising since 80s continuously and on the level to resolve the negotiation, but that dialogue and negotiation never began, and then some sort of the unilateral actions was taken by India, and that triggered a year in Nepal, and then consequently we come to this point, and then we should go back again. Dialogue. That I would like to say, and then that is bilateral matters, not a trilateral, and should not bring in any third party. We can bring India, China, and Nepal, we sit together for the socio-economic development matters. Particularly that we talk about the China in Nepal, India economic corridor, that we try to organize one in 2016. I myself was involved in organizing one seminar for the trilateral cooperation. But India's response is not very encouraging, enthusiastic until now. And then if India is enthusiastic, Nepal is ready to join hands together.
So I guess you are having some problem in your internet. I think we all are not being able to hear you.
Discussed between the two prime ministers and president of China and the prime minister of India in their informal meeting, that 2+1 format. And then on that format, some politicians have some doubts that 2+1 means first two party would be the first parties, and the third one would be the addendum, some kinds of the consultative letter. That kinds of the unequal partnership would be not maybe conducive for the trilateral cooperation. That is what some politician says. That's why the trilateralism in the economic cooperation, that's fine, and not the border confrontation issues. Maybe only other cooperative matters, trilateral matters can come up, and then maybe have some economic cooperation, trilateral economic cooperation platform can be created. And the talking about the Galwan Valley, there are and then lot of people globally have spoken in different ways. When that Galwan that fish-up was appeared, just one day before, there was some American marine warships that crossed that South China Sea on the disputed territory, and the overlapping the China's some sort of the sensitive parts. And some people have reported like that also in the media, and then I got through the media reporting. It is not any confidential matter. And then wanted to link up with that, and then some more thought about that. Some Indian scholars also even have written that India has the supreme a little bit more strength than China in the East Indian Ocean, and in the Malacca Bay, where the China's the major the trade route for the maritime trade route. And then can be China can be contained or controlled through that. And then some people linked up with the Indo-Pacific US-led Indo-Pacific strategy. Some people even compare with the BRI in Indo-Pacific. I don't want to compare with it. And there are two different parameters, different kinds of the propositions. BRI particularly is the socio-economic development propositions, and it's the bilateral kinds of the cooperation mechanism for the socio-economic development, and for the Indo-Pacific strategy is the American strategy, and it's the American policy. There is nothing some sort of the bilateral kinds of the agreements, and then some people can cooperate and join hands together with United States on that strategy if they agreed on that, and then find some sort of the common understandings or the common domain or to work together with them. And that's what, for me, I don't see that. And then Galwan Valley has some sort of the linkages with the other issues, except that definitely India, when that amended the constitution for that changing status of the Kashmir, and then creating Ladakh as an independent territory and then controlled by Delhi, and then that was how somehow created some sort of the suspicion in Chinese mind, and then that come up through I read it through the media, that and that's why the China must be careful and cautious in that area in lately, and then might have more cautious and careful. And India was also strengthening its infrastructure building activities in that area, and then reinforcing military. That's why that the escalation of the military that resulted to the May 15, 16 incident, and then very sad incident. I think that both of them have learned. Based on that, afterward, the fourth round of meeting between the highest high political military held just 3 days ago, I think last Tuesday. And then de-escalations already started. I don't see that they will have any kinds of the arms or military confrontations, and they can afford. They cannot afford to have that kinds of the military confrontation at this moment. At this moment in that. That's why what I can say is that this is because of both the country's institution, and the second that they have learned a lesson from the.
All right, sir.
That they both of them wants to
all right,
de-escalate the. Yeah, but as I said, there is no possibility of ante May 5 to live together with that situation, and then we should try to ease out the problems or tensions or conflict in the region.
All right, thank you so much. Now there is another question to Professor Chang. I guess you are listening me. China has initiated many development projects throughout South Asia, which is a good thing. However, unlike other countries engaging in development projects in this region, China would give priority to Chinese laborers instead of recruiting from local communities. What is the reason behind it?
Frankly, I saw lots of this kind of complaint about China's projects. I think we have several. I have several points I want to take. The first, most of the Chinese company, most of the Chinese can't speak English, can't speak any local language, specifically in Nepal, in Pakistan, in India. Most of the Chinese just can't speak Chinese. So it's very hard for a Chinese manager to directly lead lots of local workers to work. They must employ some Chinese workers from China. Then let this Chinese worker as leader, as model, to lead some local workers. It's a very typical, very normal Chinese companies' labor structure outside China. And when I stayed in China Embassy in New Delhi, and we also have a Chinese company that were building rooms for embassy. They use this kind of model. Actually, the Chinese company employed most from local, not most from China. You can list it. And for construction, about 1 to 7, 1 to 10. And for some technical company, such as Zhongxin, such as Huawei, they may 1 to 5. And it's generally 1 to 5. It means one Chinese, 5 local people, like this. So it's a Chinese style. You know, I once interviewed some Chinese companies, and their manager clearly told me that not any intention to employ Chinese, because if you employed one Chinese from China, you must pay very higher salary. It's not good for company. Company, they like to employ more and more local workers, not Chinese. So it's not a political reason, it's not an economic reason. I think it's mainly about the management issue. Without lots of Chinese, there's no way for Chinese company to organize work, to organize activities.
All right, thank you. Thank you. There is a common question to both of you, Professor Chang and Dr. Panda. Maybe Mr. Chang will respond first. This is a long question, but I think to sum it up, India and China are going differently with BRI and Indo-Pacific strategy differently, as the question says. And it would be better if both the parties go together with only one strategy. So can they both come to a common ground of the any one of them? So this may be a beautiful question, but maybe impractical. So would you like to respond this?
Yes. Okay. So just a few quick points. Firstly, I understand India's concern about the BRI. India is not a small country. India is a power, big power. Not any big country, bigger power, like follow other countries' initiative. And you can see similarly in China. If India have some initiative, if US have something, and China usually will say no, and it's very natural. And the second point, and India maybe do not like a term of BRI. It doesn't mean India do not like connectivity building. So BRI program, they build lots of ports, lots of road, and every country can use it. Not necessarily say Chinese company build it is just used by Chinese. It's not possible. I give you one example. When China completed Hambantota port for Sri Lanka, the first ship anchored from India, and this ship shipped a lot of Tata companies' cars to sell to Sri Lanka. So it is what I say, BRI, the key is connectivity. And every country, every company can use BRI's connectivity building, not just for China. So I do not think, so based on this, I think India's AAGC and others is also based on connectivity building. So if we shift the more term, we can find between China and India, we have lots of common issue. And both countries want to have a much better connectivity regionally or globally. Okay.
Thank you. Dr. Panda.
Yes, I think we don't have to see differently both the BRI and Indo-Pacific initiatives, because both are different initiatives. BRI is a China-driven, it is a China-driven international initiatives by the Chinese government to promote infrastructure investment and connectivity, not only within Asia, but beyond Asia. Whereas Indo-Pacific initiatives is just a geospatial space. It is not an investment or a connectivity initiatives. It's just a proposition to define a geopolitical space where countries can have an inclusive approach for development. So I don't think China is excluded from Indo-Pacific. I think like the way India holds reservation about BRI, China holds reservation about Indo-Pacific. Maybe we draw the conclusion because of that, but I think both are separate issues. China needs to see that Indo-Pacific is not against China. Indo-Pacific is more about the countries, those who wants to protect their interest, the countries they wants to enhance their interest. So it is a space for development. It is a space for a greater coalition to preserve the liberal international economic order. And I think that differentiation has to be made. And if we are making that differentiation, then we'll have clarity. But as far as the BRI is concerned, I think I would agree to some extent Professor Chang's point here that yes, maybe India has some reservation, but India has reservation for good reasons. India joined in AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Why did India decide to join? Because it was based on a multilateral forums, it was based on a consultative measures, and India was consulted before it was introduced. And India was a founding member. But that was not the case with BRI. India was not involved in the BRI process when Chinese government proposed the BRI. So I think India is having a genuine position, and the way the Chinese government is proposing the China-Pakistan economic corridor, it affects India's national sovereignty. No country will, accept that. So I think there India has a valid point, and that needs to be respected.
All right, thank you. So there is another question. Maybe Professor Chang will respond this. Do you have any recommendations to Nepal and India to resolve the issue of border between them two, especially on Lipu Lake, Limpiadura, and Kali River?
So, firstly, I think Nepal's current foreign policy is right. You still maintain balance between China and India. It's very important for Nepal and this kind of country. And for India and Nepal relationship, specifically for border disputes, I know it's a very old issue, very old issue. I do believe you can, you are two sides, you can find a way to solve the issue. It's not a very big issue for India. It's just a very small land for India. And maybe it's very big for Nepal. So we already have lots of principles. Lots of Indian friends like to say the watershed principle. So you can use the watershed principle. You can find where is river, where is water flow. You can find some way maybe for your disputes. Just the 2 points.
All right, thank you. So maybe we are running out of time. It's already 5 o'clock. I guess we can take only 2 questions now. But there are altogether 3 questions. Maybe if you go briefly, we can take all the questions. Taking all the questions may be better, I think. So please be more briefer than others. Question to Mr. Jagannath. By agreeing to some valuable points you have presented, I would like to have clarity about the allegation of India's influence in drafting a new constitution of Nepal. If it is true, isn't it an attempt to overrule sovereignty of Nepal? This is a question you may have been saying. Would you like to respond to it?
Yeah, I think I'll return back to my first question's answer. I think what we are calling influence, how we are defining influence, how we are defining interference is a subjective issue. It can be anybody's call. And therefore, I would suggest that before we call it an interference, before we call it an influence, we need to ask that how closely India and Nepal are linked with each other when it comes to trade, society, political connections, day-to-day economic dealings. So I don't really see that, this should be seen as a kind of a interfering or a influencing issue. And I think ethnic issues is also a critical issue. So therefore, saying that India is interfering with the making of the Chinese constitution, the Nepalese constitution, it's not really a valid proposition here.
All right. I think we may take only 2 questions now. I'm sorry, participants. Please don't write the questions now because we are just running out of the time. This is a question maybe to Dr. Panda and Professor Chang. Professor Chang, please respond first. How do you consider the prospects of triangular relationship and cooperation between China, Nepal, and India? Triangular relationship between the 3 countries.
You want me?
Okay, Panda, you first.
Who will respond first? Professor Chang?
Okay, just a quick.
Please.
And till now, I think if without a pandemic influence, trade between China, Nepal, and India, and it's going well, I think. But currently, we are facing some problem. The biggest problem comes from nationalism. I call it economic nationalism, specifically in India. You can see in India, lots of anti-China economic nationalism policies and activities. Actually, India's economic nationalism not just against China, it's also against the other countries, such as the United States. And in the last year, you see U.S. President Trump was very angry about this issue. I think we understand sometimes, but I think it's not a good issue. And we need a trade, we need international economic engagements, we need each other. So I hope our Indian friends can change something. So, yeah, I'll stop here.
Yeah, all right, Dr. Panda.
Yeah, I think, a relationship management among the neighbors is the biggest issue in international relations. There will be disputes, there will be differences, and there will be disruptions. So let's understand one thing. Disputes, differences, and disruptions are part of international relations. We need to manage it. As long as we manage it conveniently, I think India, China, Nepal relationship would be really in a healthy regional frame. But more than that, I think what we need to realize is that we 3 countries, if we continue to fight, who is the beneficiary of this process? None other than the outside powers. I mean, I think it is going to affect all of our economies. Indian economy is not really an incompetent economy that it will struggle just like that. Chinese economy is just not an ordinary economy. But Nepalese economy is heavily dependent on Chinese economy and Indian economy. So I think Nepal should act as a bridge between India and China. And we need to nurture this trilateral relationship, keeping apart the differences, the disputes, and the dissensions. Thank you.
All right. So thank you so much. Now we have a last question. This question is to Mr. Lilamani Paudel, sir. Lilamani, sir, are you getting me? Yeah, I think you are muted.
Yes.
Oh, all right.
Yes.
Why Nepal is
Be a little bit louder.
Yeah, why Nepal is remain silent regarding the misuse of Gorkha army by Indian government against both China and Pakistan, with violating the provision of tripartite agreement, which has strictly banned the use of Gorkha army against Nepal and friendly state of Nepal. Yeah, this is the last question of this session.
Actually, I already mentioned that earlier Nepal should not have remained silent on that particular matter, because it was written in the agreement, and then all the parties who signed the agreement should abide by the conditions laid down on the agreement. That's why Nepal, I don't know that why Nepal remained silent on the earlier time, because I was not a part of that, the role and responsibilities from the government side. And then, but this time I don't think that Nepal can remain silent on that part, because the people's pressure would definitely go to the government to speak out on that matter. That kinds of the feelings and sentiments has already been surfaced out in media massively in the previous days. That's why there is no any evidence that right now that in the forefront they are used. Although there was one incident very recently, the one Nepali Gurkha soldier was died in Kashmir, and then don't know whether it is because of that cross-border fire, or it was within the inside, because there are some incidences inside also. But that if there is some kinds of the big scale, the cross-border that conflicts arises, and then the Gurkha regiments are used on that area, and then Nepal should speak out very clearly, and then we definitely will speak in the future.
All right. Thank you, sir. I think we have done with the session, maybe second round as well now. We thank you all, the speakers, all the participants. I think this is a very incredible session regarding the India-China relationship and the impact, especially to Nepal, and little bit on the region as well. And without further delay, for the vote of time and to the concluding remarks, I would like to call up Dr. Chairperson of this webinar, Dr. Risiraj Adhikari. I will take by here. Dr. Adhikari.
Thank you, Brazil. Namaste, everybody. Speakers, Mr. Lilamani Paudel, former ambassador to China, Nepal, and former chief secretary to the government of Nepal. Dr. Jagannath Panda, IDSI, India. Professor Dr. Zhang Shangjiu Tong from Fudan University, China. Other distinguished personnel with expertise and interest in politics, security, and diplomacy in the region, including India, China, and Nepal. Friends from media, my colleagues at NIIR. A very good afternoon. It is delightful to see you and meet up with you all. I am thankful to all of you for your active participation and contributions in the preceding deliberation. Very rich views have been already expressed and shared and discussed. So I will not be dwelling on that. I would like to prefer to skip the content part. But meanwhile, I must share that if India and China want Nepal to develop and prosper, they are expected to sort out their differences peacefully. Nepal is a peace-loving country, as we draw the strength of peace from Lord Buddha, the apostle of peace, born in our country. We often hear an anecdote whether two elephants are shouting love or fighting with each other, the poor grass underneath gets trampled both ways. We always believe and be careful to practice to live equidistance from both the elephants. Similarly, we expect none to blame us that we favor one against other, putting ourselves in peril. I would also like that our neighbors sort out their differences by themselves and not being unduly influenced by third party, how much powerful and rich the party may be. I appreciate more than one ambassadors from China who have reminded me to always be close with the South. That is a good advice from good friends. Once again, I thank you all. We will meet soon over other important issues in the days to come. I request for your support in NIIR's future endeavors. I hereby close the webinar for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.